You've swallowed your pride to keep the peace. You've apologized when you weren't wrong. You've let the disrespect slide because everyone told you to be the bigger person and turn the other cheek. You've watched less competent, louder, colder people take what you earned. While you stood there calm, rational, and bleeding internally, they lied to you. The concept of being the bigger person was engineered by manipulators to ensure that good people never fight back, keeping you perpetually weak and easily exploitable. You weren't being mature. You were being trained. You weren't being enlightened. You were being domesticated. This video is your final warning. If you do not unlearn this toxic programming today, you will be used for the rest of your life. Watch closely, because we are about to destroy the nice person inside you forever. Now listen carefully, because the moment you understand what Machiavelli is really saying, your entire relationship to guilt changes. You were taught that forgive and forget is moral. But in real power dynamics, forgive and forget is a permission slip for repeat behavior. You were taught that the high road proves character. But the high road is often just a slow, scenic route back to the same humiliation. And here is the forbidden question you've been scared to ask out loud. Because you already know the answer. What if the people telling you to forgive and forget are actually just terrified of what happens when you finally hold them accountable? You feel that, don't you? You notice who gets nervous when you stop smoothing things over. You notice who starts calling you cold when you stop being convenient. You notice who suddenly preaches peace when you finally grow teeth. That isn't spirituality. That's self-preservation on their side, because your empathy has been evolutionarily hijacked. Your kindness has been socially engineered. Your identity as the bigger person has been welded to Cialdini's consistency principle. So once you've forgiven once, you feel pressure to stay consistent and forgive again. And it's been welded to social proof. So when the group rewards the loud offender and pressures the quiet victim, you learn to doubt your own perception. That's dark psychology in its cleanest form. They make your goodness predictable, then they exploit it. Forgiveness without changed behavior is just a polite word for self-harm. So here's the promise. In the next minutes, you will learn Machiavelli's 5 laws of ruthless self-preservation. 5 laws that turn you from the bleeding heart victim who absorbs disrespect to keep the peace into the icy strategist who lets bridges burn and watches enemies drown without blinking. Not with violence, not with harassment, not with petty retaliation that makes you look unstable, with manipulation defense, with strategic thinking, with emotional detachment so clean it becomes intimidating, with Machiavellian strategy that keeps your hands clean and your power intact. You will learn how to deal with toxic people without explaining yourself. You will learn how to stop negotiating with your own boundaries. You will learn how to become untouchable in toxic relationships by removing your attention like it's oxygen and watching what happens to anyone who tried to breathe through you. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop a "let them fall" in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. You were told being the bigger person makes you strong. You were told it makes you mature. You were told it makes you rare. But you need to see what it actually does in real power dynamics. It makes you predictable. And predictable people are easy to use. You know the pattern. You feel the same script repeat in different rooms with different faces. You speak calmly. You communicate clearly. You offer a second chance. You offer understanding. You offer grace. You over-explain. You underreact. You get called reasonable. You get praised for being so patient. And then you get disrespected again. Because the world doesn't reward goodness. It rewards leverage. And when you keep choosing the bigger person, you keep choosing to remove your leverage. Why is it that the people who demand your empathy are the ones who show you the least? Look back at your life and notice something brutal. The people who benefited most from your forgiveness rarely became better. They became bolder. Your mercy didn't reform them. It trained them. It taught them the price of hurting you is low. You didn't keep the peace. You kept access. You kept their access to your time. You kept their access to your labor. You kept their access to your emotional bandwidth. You kept their access to your attention, the most valuable currency in modern social dominance. And you did it because you were taught that conflict is evil, that anger is immature, that boundaries are harsh. But your anger was never the problem. Your anger was the alarm. You were taught to silence the alarm so the intruder could keep walking through your house. Your guilt is not a moral compass. It is a leash installed by your abusers. And yes, sometimes the abuser is subtle. Sometimes it's not screaming or obvious cruelty. Sometimes it's the co-worker who dumps tasks on you with a smile. Sometimes it's the friend who forgets you exist until they need something. Sometimes it's the family member who weaponizes tradition and obligation. Sometimes it's the partner who apologizes perfectly, then repeats the same behavior with cleaner excuses. You've been living inside a social program where your role is the stabilizer. You are the one who absorbs chaos so others can stay comfortable. You are the one who swallows truth so others can keep their image. You are the one who forgives so others can avoid consequences. And the moment you step out of that role, people call you selfish, not because you changed, because their access changed. The high road is crowded with victims. The apex is reserved for strategists. So before we even touch Law 1, you need to accept a new identity. You are not here to be understood. You are not here to be liked. You are not here to be the group's emotional janitor. You are here to preserve yourself. You were taught that self-preservation is shameful, but Machiavelli understood something you were never allowed to say. Morality without power is just vulnerability wearing makeup. Now here's the first retention hook, because if you miss this, you will keep bleeding. Understanding the bigger person trap is only the beginning. Law number 1 shows you the exact moment to withdraw access so cleanly that manipulators can't even argue with you without exposing themselves. You don't need to punish them. You need to remove yourself as a resource. This is where your ruthless mindset begins, not in cruelty, but in refusal. You stop being available. You stop being reachable. You stop being the emergency exit for people who keep setting fires. You were taught that cutting people off is dramatic, but in Machiavellian strategy, access is privilege, and privilege is earned. So you make a rule, simple, cold, and non-negotiable. If someone repeatedly crosses a boundary, you don't discuss it forever. You don't process it forever. You don't therapize it forever. You deny access. You don't announce it with an essay. You don't post about it. You don't recruit an audience. You just become scarce. You become opaque. You become hard to reach, harder to read, and impossible to guilt. You don't owe anyone closure. Silence is a complete sentence. And watch what happens when you do this. A healthy person adjusts, a respectful person notices, a decent person changes behavior. But a manipulator panics because they weren't attached to you. They were attached to what you provided. They were attached to your forgiveness cycle. They were attached to your emotional labor. They were attached to your predictable, bigger person routine. So when you deny access, they will test you. They will send a casual message like nothing happened. They will bait you with nostalgia. They will act confused. They will act wounded. They will act offended that you're making things a big deal. And here is the first phrase you must recognize in toxic relationships, the one they use when they realize you're walking away. You're really going to throw all this away? Translation: you're really going to stop being useful? You don't debate that phrase. You don't explain it. You don't defend yourself. You don't prove your pain is valid. You treat that sentence like a fingerprint at the crime scene, because it reveals their worldview. Your job is to maintain the connection, even if they poison it. Your job is to keep the bridge standing, even if they keep lighting it on fire. No. You were taught to be the bigger person, but Machiavelli knew that the person who controls access controls the relationship. And this is manipulation defense at its sharpest. You stop giving warnings to people who already heard you. You stop negotiating with repeat offenders. You stop offering one more chance to someone who has already spent 10. When you deny access, you will feel guilt. You will feel the old program try to drag you back, and that's how you know it's working. If you still feel guilty when you say no, you must listen to this next part carefully, because Law 2 is where you stop being kind with boundaries and become a force. Machiavelli's line about injury is not a call to violence, it's a call to decisiveness. In modern life, your injury is a consequence. It's the consequence of losing your presence. It's the consequence of losing your support. It's the consequence of losing your problem solving. It's the consequence of losing your emotional availability. It's the consequence of losing your loyalty. And Machiavelli's point is simple. If you give consequences, make them final enough that you don't have to keep fighting the same battle. Because half measures create vendettas. A soft boundary creates a determined predator. A weak consequence teaches them how far they can go. As Machiavelli knew, an enemy forgiven is simply an enemy reloading their weapon. This is where most betrayed intellectuals fail. You are smart, you are patient, you are nuanced, you see context, you see complexity, and manipulators use your intelligence against you. They drag you into nuance to avoid accountability. They turn every confrontation into philosophy. They turn every betrayal into a misunderstanding. They turn every boundary into a conversation. They turn every consequence into a debate. And you keep participating because you think the goal is resolution. Their goal is endurance. They don't need to win the argument. They need to keep you engaged long enough for your empathy to kick in and override your standards. So Law 2 is this. When the pattern is proven, the consequence is permanent. Not because you're cruel, because you're done being trained. You stop being the person who can be worn down. You stop being the person who can be guilted back into access. You stop being the person who gives someone the exact same opportunity to hurt you again, just with better wording next time. Let's make it tactical. You identify the repeating behavior, not the apology, not the mood, not the story, the behavior. You ask yourself one question, cold, clean, and surgical. If nothing changes, how will this end? You already know. You've already seen the ending. You've watched this movie. And if you already know the ending, why are you still acting surprised? Why are you still donating your nervous system to people who treat you like a tool? Why are you still calling it love when it's just tolerance for disrespect? Why are you still calling it maturity when it's just fear of conflict? Why are you still being the bigger person for someone committed to being the smaller soul? Here's the paradox. The more understanding you become with someone who lacks character, the more dangerous you become to yourself. Forgiveness without changed behavior is just a polite word for self-harm. So you make the cost final. You don't keep reopening the case. You don't keep relitigating the past. You don't keep accepting, I didn't mean it, as if impact disappears because intention is edited. You establish a rule inside yourself. I do not require agreement to enforce my boundary. That is ruthless self-preservation. That is emotional intelligence weaponized. That is dark psychology used for defense instead of self-destruction. And now the retention hook you can't ignore. But Law 2 only works if you understand what happens next. Because when you make a cost final, they will attempt Law 3 on you. They will try to extract a reaction. And if they get it, they regain control. Your reaction is their oxygen. Your explanation is their playground. Your anger, your tears, your long messages, your voice shaking while you try to be fair, that is the doorway back into you. So Law 3 is not stay calm. Law 3 is remove your emotional output from the equation. You become silent on purpose. You don't go silent to punish. You go silent to control the frame. Because in power dynamics, the person who speaks first often reveals need. The person who over-explains often reveals weakness. The person who argues often reveals they still want permission. You stop asking permission. You stop trying to be seen by people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to be validated by people who profit from your self-doubt. You don't plead your case to a rigged jury. You were taught that silence is avoidance. But Machiavellian strategy treats silence like a fortress. You let your absence do the talking. You let your consistency do the explaining. You let your life move forward without them as evidence. And you prepare for what comes next because manipulators hate silence more than they hate boundaries. Silence creates a vacuum, and in that vacuum, their mind starts to collapse. They can't read you, they can't predict you, they can't calibrate their next move, so they escalate. They send bait messages, they recruit third parties, they create concern, they manufacture urgency. They do it because they need one thing, proof that they still have access to your inner weather. And here is the line you must carve into your nervous system. You don't win by proving you're right. You win by becoming unreachable. You don't win by delivering the perfect speech. You win by refusing the stage. You don't win by making them admit it. You win by making their influence irrelevant. You don't owe anyone closure. Silence is a complete sentence. Now, let's get brutal and precise, because you need to know how this plays out. There is one specific moment a manipulator reveals themselves, when they accuse you of what they are doing. They will call you manipulative for setting boundaries. They will call you selfish for protecting your time. They will call you cold for refusing to perform forgiveness. And if you respond emotionally, they win twice. They get your attention. And they get to label your attention as instability. So you do something that feels almost supernatural the first time you do it. You don't react. You observe without engagement. You read their message like a scientist reading data, not like a wounded child reading a verdict. You choose the sentence that ends the conversation without beginning a new one. Sometimes it's, "I'm not available for this." Sometimes it's, "I've made my decision." Sometimes it's nothing. And when you choose nothing, you will feel your old conditioning scream. You will feel the program say, "But that's rude." You will feel the program say, "But they'll think you're the bad guy." You will feel the program say, "But what if they're hurt?" And you answer the program with one sentence. Why is it that the people who demand your empathy are the ones who show you the least? Now you're starting to see the full system. Dark psychology isn't only something others use against you. It's something you can understand so deeply that you stop being controllable. But don't get comfortable, because the moment you go silent, a smarter manipulator doesn't chase you directly. They attack your reputation. And if you fail Law 4, the smear campaign will attempt to isolate you, destabilize you, and drag you back into defending yourself. You were taught that if you do the right thing, people will see the truth. That's a fairy tale told to obedient people. In real power dynamics, perception often arrives before proof. In toxic relationships, the first story told is the one that sticks. So Law 4 is ruthless self-preservation at a higher level. You protect your reputation before you need to. Not with drama, not with gossip, not with a public war. With strategy. You keep receipts quietly, dates, messages, patterns, because you respect reality more than you respect someone's performance. You build alliances slowly, not by complaining, but by being consistent. competent, and calm. You stop oversharing with people who haven't earned your inner world. You stop confessing your plans to people who secretly compete with you. You stop giving your enemies advance notice. This is Machiavellian strategy in modern clothes. You don't wait for the ambush, you remove the angles. Because here's what manipulators do when you refuse to be the bigger person. They turn your boundary into a character flaw. They say you're holding a grudge. They say you're bitter. They say you changed. They say you're unstable. They say you're hard to please. And if you panic and start defending yourself, you step into their trap. You become the spectacle. They become the victim. And the group, using social proof, leans toward the louder narrative. So you do the opposite. You stay composed. You stay minimal. You stay factual. You don't launch a counterattack. You don't need to. You let time reveal the pattern. Because here's what stays true in dark psychology. The manipulator cannot maintain the mask forever. They require constant emotional supply, constant conflict, constant control. And when you don't provide it, they start leaking. They start contradicting themselves. They start escalating. They start targeting new people. And eventually the same crowd they recruited will experience the same pattern. This is the part most people can't handle. The patience required for someone to expose themselves. Most people cave under the pressure of isolation, but the true strategist does this instead. You accept temporary misunderstanding to preserve permanent power. You accept being misread by the weak to become respected by the perceptive. You accept silence now so you don't live inside defense forever. And you keep one principle in front of you like a blade. Never be the bigger person for someone committed to making you smaller. Now you're ready for the law that completes the transformation. The law that separates the survivors from the masters. Because Law 5 requires a complete death of your ego. It requires you to stop needing the satisfying ending where they finally understand. It requires you to stop needing the apology. It requires you to stop needing the universe to validate you in public. And when you can do that, you become untouchable. Your old self tries to rescue people who harm you. Your old self tries to explain, soften, and translate reality into something they can accept. Your old self thinks, if I can just say it the right way, they'll change. That is not love. That is control disguised as compassion. And it's also a hidden arrogance, the belief that your effort can replace someone's character. So Law 5 is the final initiation. You let them experience the full consequences of who they are, without you cushioning the impact. You don't chase, you don't warn, you don't save, you don't absorb, you don't cover, you don't clean up, you let them fall. Because the harsh truth is this: some people only learn through loss. Some people only respect what they can't access. Some people only stop when the door is locked and the lights are off. And when you keep being the bigger person, you keep interrupting the one teacher that could reach them. Consequences. This is why your refusal to forgive isn't petty. It's high IQ self-respect. It's the end of the empathy hijack. It's the end of you being farmed for patience. It's the end of you being used as an emotional resource. Now listen, this is where your ruthless mindset becomes visible to others, and that visibility creates fear. When you let them fall, they will test one last lever, your identity. They will say, I thought you were a good person. They will say, you're not like this. They will say, this isn't you. Translation, come back into the role where you are easiest to exploit. And you answer with behavior, not words. You remain detached, you remain unavailable, you remain calm enough that your calm becomes a threat. Because emotional detachment is not emptiness. Emotional detachment is control. You were taught that indifference is cruelty, but in power dynamics, indifference is immunity. You don't hate them, you don't obsess over them, you don't stalk their life. You don't run a smear campaign. You don't get revenge in messy ways. You simply remove the reward. You stop feeding the pattern. You stop being the person who makes their life easier while they make your life heavier. You stop being their rehabilitation center. You stop being their second chance dispenser. And here's the part your ego will resist, so I'm going to say it directly to you. You don't need them to drown for you to be powerful. You need to stop throwing them your lifeboat. That's it. You let the bridge burn because the bridge was the path they used to reach your peace. You let the silence expand because the silence is where you recover your attention. You let the distance grow because the distance is where your nervous system stops flinching. And then something shocking happens. When you apply this protocol tomorrow, pay close attention to the panic in their eyes. They will sense it. They will sense that you are no longer negotiating. They will sense that you are no longer afraid of being disliked. They will sense that you are no longer bribable with apology performances. They will sense that you have exited the game where they win by exhausting you. And the moment they sense that, your value rises. Not because you begged, because you withdrew. Not because you explained, because you enforced. Not because you were bigger, because you were final. This is Machiavelli in real life. This is Machiavellian strategy without the cartoon villain nonsense. This is dark psychology as self-defense. This is manipulation defense as a lifestyle. This is emotional intelligence with teeth. This is social dominance through self-respect. Now let's lock the full system into your bones, because you're not here to feel inspired. You're here to become untouchable. You deny access. You make costs final. You weaponize silence. You armor your reputation. You let them fall. And you do it without rage controlling you. You do it with precision. You do it with restraint. You do it with a calm so cold it rewrites the room's power dynamics. Because the ultimate form of control isn't getting even. It's becoming someone they can't reach. It's becoming someone who no longer provides the emotional handle they use to pull you around. It's becoming someone who can look at a manipulator's collapse, whether it's social, professional, or personal, and feel nothing but clarity. Not joy, not cruelty, clarity. And that clarity is the crown. You came here carrying betrayal. You came here carrying the humiliation of being forced to apologize to people who destroyed your peace. You came here carrying the exhaustion of being the bigger person in toxic relationships where peace was just your silence and their comfort. Now you leave with a new operating system. You see the empathy hijack. You see the social proof trap. You see the consistency trap. You see the hidden contracts you never agreed to. You see the power dynamics you were punished for noticing, and you stop participating. Never lower your standards to accommodate someone else's dysfunction. If you're done being trained, prove it. Comment, let them fall, and subscribe. Because this isn't content for spectators. This is an alliance for sovereign minds, silent strategists, and people who are finished begging for respect. If you're ready to master dark psychology without becoming reckless, if you're ready to use Machiavelli as a blueprint for ruthless self-preservation, if you're ready for manipulation defense that makes you calm, feared, and impossible to exploit, then you belong here. And if you want to know how to maintain this aura of power in any room you enter, click the video on screen. See what others miss. Know what others fear. Become who others can't.